Sparta didn't raise people, it forged weapons. And if you weren't sharp enough, they broke you, strip you of everything at birth. Sparta didn't wait for you to grow up before it took control of you. It started the moment you were born, literally day one. The second you came into this world, you weren't treated like a blessing. You were treated like property. You weren't a baby, you were a potential soldier. That was your only value, and that was your only purpose. The first test is survival. See, Spartan elders inspected every newborn, checked your bones, your body, your build. If you looked weak, fragile, or just off, they didn't hesitate. They threw you, because to Sparta, weakness wasn't allowed to grow. A single weak link could mess up the entire chain, so they cut it early. But let's say you passed. Congrats, you don't die. Now you get raised without comfort. You got the same treatment as every other Spartan child. Same food, same training, same punishments. You didn't even belong to your parents. You belonged to the state. Your parents could visit you, and that's it. The government was your real father. They fed you just enough to stay alive, made you walk barefoot, gave you a single cloak for the entire year. Hot or freezing didn't matter, because control begins with pain, and Sparta knew if they made you suffer early, they'd own you forever. So from birth, Sparta took your body, your comfort, and your family. They left you with one thing, discipline, and that was just step one. Take their childhood and turn it into a weapon. In Sparta, childhood wasn't about toys or stories or being protected by your parents. It was a tool used by the state to take control early. At the age of 7, every boy was taken from his home and sent into the agoge, a brutal military training system designed to break him down and build him into a Spartan warrior. From the moment a child entered the agoge, he belonged to Sparta, not his family. Discipline was the core of everything. Boys trained from sunrise to sunset. They learned to fight, march, endure pain, survive alone in the wild, and stay silent even when scared or starving. Crying wasn't just discouraged, it was punished. But it wasn't just physical control. Sparta used the agoge to shape the mind. Boys were taught not to think for themselves, but to follow commands without hesitation. Loyalty to the state was drilled into them daily. Individual desires were replaced by group discipline. You didn't live for yourself, but you lived for Sparta. Even their relationships were controlled. Older boys were paired with younger ones in a system meant to create bonds, but also to establish dominance and control. Everything was monitored. The way you spoke, the way you ate, even how you walked, every detail mattered. If you failed, you were shamed. And in a place like Sparta, shame was worse than pain. Hunger was part of the training too. The boys were deliberately underfed, forcing them to steal to survive. But if they got caught, they were punished. Not for stealing, but for failing and getting caught. It was a twisted lesson in being smart, quiet, and ruthless. By the time a Spartan boy became a teenager, he wasn't just trained, he was reshaped. His mind was conditioned to follow, to endure, and to fight without question. And if someone couldn't keep up, they were thrown out with no second chances. This was how Sparta kept control, by taking children and turning them into tools of the state before they even had a chance to think otherwise. Control through isolation. One of Sparta's strongest tools for control wasn't force or fear, it was isolation. They didn't just train people to obey, they cut them off from the outside world so completely that most Spartans never even realized there was another way to live. Sparta didn't want its people influenced by foreign ideas, luxuries, or politics, so they shut the doors. Foreigners were rarely allowed in, and Spartans were rarely allowed out. Trade was limited, travel was restricted, outsiders were viewed with suspicion. If someone came in talking about art, democracy, or wealth, they were seen as dangerous. Not because their ideas were bad, but because they were different. And different meant uncontrolled. Even their money was designed to keep people cut off. While the rest of Greece used gold and silver coins, Sparta forced its citizens to use heavy iron bars. These weren't easy to carry. They weren't accepted in other cities. They were almost impossible to steal or hoard. So wealth didn't get passed around. People couldn't bribe others or suddenly gain power through money. The system made sure no one rose too far above anyone else. This isolation wasn't only physical, but also mental. Spartans weren't encouraged to read poetry or debate philosophy. They weren't allowed to chase wealth, build flashy homes, or throw fancy feasts. Those things were seen as soft, corrupting, and foreign. Instead, they were taught that simple living, obedience, and loyalty to the state were the only things that mattered. And if someone didn't follow that mindset, they were treated like a threat. Anyone who spoke too much, questioned the system, or showed too much ambition could be pushed out, sometimes literally. By keeping their people in a controlled environment with strict limits on outside contact, Sparta made sure that the only world its citizens knew was the one Sparta created. And that was exactly how they liked it. A Spartan who never saw another way of life was a Spartan who would never question the one he had. Control who you marry, control the bloodline. In Sparta, marriage wasn't about love. It wasn't about happiness or building a family. It was about producing future warriors. Everything in Spartan life was designed to serve the state, and that included who you married and why. Spartan men and women didn't get the freedom to choose their partners. Instead, the government decided who was worthy of procreating. Spartan marriage was a tool for controlling the population and ensuring the strength of the army for generations to come. At a certain age, Spartan men were expected to marry, but the process wasn't the simple joining of two people out of love. The first step in marriage was a state-approved match. Your family didn't choose your wife, your city-state did. They assessed your family's background, your health, and your warrior potential. For women, the rules were even stricter. Their role wasn't just raising children, it was actually producing soldiers for Sparta. Women were raised to be strong, not just to stay at home and care for children, but to ensure they could raise strong warriors. They exercised and kept in shape so they could give birth to the healthiest, most capable children. Even the actual marriage ceremony was strict. Spartan men often didn't even live with their wives after marriage. Instead, they kept up their military duties and lived in barracks. Women remained at home managing the household, but the government made sure that their duty was clear. The children they produced had to be raised strong and loyal to Sparta. The power of this control wasn't just in the marriages themselves, it was in the children. Spartan society was hyper-focused on the next generation of warriors, and that started before birth. Women were encouraged to have children with strong, healthy men, and any baby that didn't meet Spartan standards was discarded. This way of controlling the bloodline ensured that Sparta always had enough strong, disciplined soldiers to maintain its dominance. Your life belongs to the state, not to you. From the moment you were born to the day you died, you weren't living for yourself, but you were living for the state. Your choices, your time, your body, it all belonged to Sparta. There was no such thing as free time. Freedom didn't exist unless it served a purpose. If you were a man, your purpose was war. If you were a woman, your purpose was creating more warriors. Everything else was a distraction. You weren't supposed to chase pleasure. You weren't supposed to live for yourself. You existed to strengthen the state. Spartan men were enrolled in military service from age 7 until 60. Even after marriage, you still lived in military barracks. You ate in public mess halls. You trained daily. You followed orders. And if you ever put yourself before Sparta, even for a moment, you were seen as weak and unfit to be called a Spartan. The state decided when you ate, when you fought, when you trained, when you rested. And even in death, your life still belonged to Sparta. Only those who died in battle or in childbirth were given marked graves. Everyone else faded into nothing. That was the price of not dying for the state. In every breath, in every action, you were reminded you were not your own person. You were property, and that property belonged to Sparta. Control through lifestyle. Sparta controlled its people by forcing a lifestyle that was harsh from the start, leaving no space for distractions, luxury, or independent thinking. Unlike other Greek city-states where people enjoyed festivals, art, and debate, Spartans lived with almost none of that. Their lives were stripped down to the bare essentials, and that was no accident. The government didn't just want soldiers, they wanted soldiers who weren't distracted by comfort or luxury. So they banned things like gold jewelry, fancy clothes, and even large homes. Wealth was discouraged because it created desire and competition. Instead, Spartans lived in plain houses with basic furniture. They ate simple meals, usually just a thin black broth that became legendary for its tastelessness. When your life is tough and predictable, you don't have much energy left to question or rebel. You focus on surviving, on following orders, on fitting in. That was exactly what Sparta wanted. Spartan society also enforced silence and restraint in public life. Long speeches and too much talking were set aside. Instead, Spartans practiced what was called laconic speech, speaking briefly and to the point. By making life so simple and controlled, Sparta left almost no room for individuals to grow apart from the group. People didn't chase dreams or luxuries, they just lived the Spartan way, day in and day out, controlled by the harshness and quiet of their lifestyle. Control through fear and punishment. One of the most powerful ways Sparta controlled its people was through fear. Not just fear of enemies on the battlefield, but fear of punishment from their own leaders. Spartans lived in a society where mistakes were not tolerated, and weakness was punished harshly, often in front of others. When a Spartan boy failed in his training or showed weakness, the punishment was humiliating. The idea was simple: make an example out of one person to keep the entire group in check. For example, if a soldier lost his shield or fled from battle, he didn't just face his commander's anger in private. He was shamed by the entire city. In Sparta, honor and reputation meant everything. Being seen as weak or disobedient could ruin your entire life, so public shaming was a powerful way. But it wasn't only about failure. The Spartan government kept close watch on everyone's behavior. If a group or a family didn't follow the rules, the punishments could be brutal. This pressure created an intense social environment where everyone watched each other and no one wanted to be the weak link. Even adults, including elders and leaders, faced consequences for failing Spartan standards. This fear of public punishment extended across all ages and ranks, reinforcing the idea that no one was above the code. So now you're probably thinking, what's all this control even led to? Well, it's exactly what made Sparta one of the toughest and most famous armies in Greek history. Those crazy battles and wars everyone still talks about. If you want to see what those battles looked like and how this control played into them, check out the next video. And before you go, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, which way of controlling people do you think was the most messed up?